Alrighty. Hello, everybody. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you back again to How to CAD Almost Anything this year at the MIT Summer 2026 edition. Every time I finish teaching an iteration of this class, I always wonder when will I have a chance to teach it again. So I'm glad that we're all back again here this summer, especially with a new CAD software, which in this case is PTC Creo, as you can see on the icon right there. As some of the long-time viewers of this channel and of the series know, we taught this class using SolidWorks, Fusion, Onshape, Siemens NX, and just recently this past IAP, so about 5 months ago, using Autodesk Inventor. So being able to do a new CAD software is great, especially when I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that this may be the last CAD software that we needed in order to complete our portfolio of CAD softwares, at least those that I'm familiar with. So that's what we're going to dedicate the Summer 2026 edition to. As you know from the very first slide that I always have on my slide decks for every iteration that I teach this class for, I always include a subset of the projects that we'll be working on. Well, here it's not really a subset, it's all of the projects I will be doing this iteration in particular, and these are all musical instruments. As you can see, there's a great variety of objects in here. It's going to make for a great set of projects that we'll be working on throughout the next 8 weeks. As a matter of fact, we're extending a little bit the timeline. And there's a lot of things. We will start today with objects as simple as the little xylophone in there, which is not quite complex to do, but we're going to go way deeper into objects like the bongos. Even here, this is called the pipa, which is super interesting Chinese instruments. We'll do the electric guitar, natural horn, even a banjo, a trombone, and one that is very dear to my heart, as you can already tell from the background picture here, the euphonium. Maybe some folks may know from hearing me speak whenever I narrate some of the CAD objects that we CAD, that I'm a musician myself. I play this instrument, which is called the euphonium, and I've always been wondering in general how you'd be able to CAD these objects because they all seem fairly different, kind of complex. So can we leverage the tools that we have available to ourselves using CAD software to make pretty realistic depictions of these instruments? I've tried it in the past, as you guys may know from watching some videos on the channel, CADing, for instance, the trumpet. I obviously omitted the trumpet, we've already done that in the past, and that was quite interesting. It took a while, and so we're gonna leverage some of those techniques in order to make just an entire realm of different musical instruments, as you can see here. And it will give us quite a variety of things. Obviously, the techniques that you would use to make the little ukulele in there will be different to the ones that you'll use for the euphonium, different to the ones that you would use for this instrument right here that's called the morin kur, which is a Mongolian two-string violin, as an example. So I'm very much looking forward to that in here. So, well, let's get started right now with session number 1. So today's agenda consists of the following items. First, I'm going to start by, well, just going through some of the reasons why you decided to sign up for this year's edition. Also, why are you interested in learning how to CAD? And then we'll go over some of the logistics, I'll cover some of the different sessions, some of the projects that we'll be working on, and then we'll jump straight into session 1, where we'll do a demo of the overall Creo interface. We look at the different commands, or they are some of the simpler features, and then we'll use those to do our free projects for today, which include the toy xylophone, the pan flute, and the gong. I'll show you pictures of those in a minute. You may remember when every time I have my agenda slide is that historically I've always included Lego bricks in here. Instead, this year I'm putting 4 different types of violins. See, this one is the Morinkur, which I mentioned earlier. This is the Mongolian two-string violin. This one in here is the erhu, another two-stringed violin from Chinese culture. Obviously, this is the traditional violin that most of you might be familiar with. And this is like a free-string violin from Japan. So super duper interesting, a lot of variety. When I was researching this, I didn't know so many different types of violins existed, to be fair. And that's something that I'm actually excited to share with you as we go through the next 8 weeks. Not just CAD, not just learning how to do 3D modeling, but perhaps use it as an excuse to learn about the variety of musical instruments that exist. And really also perhaps to appreciate their designs and realize how intricate and delicate they may be, and how different features that might be included, for instance, something as simple as that shape might actually serve a purpose in being able to produce a sound by that instrument and improve its performance. So I'm very excited, especially about that particular aspect of this year's edition. Yeah, so some quick introductions, nothing new here. I think you guys know me. I am Andy, fourth year PhD student. I'm from Argentina. My spirit animal is the Angus Aberdeen cow. And really, why am I interested in how to cut almost anything? Because I think, as always, like as I write in there, it's cool to look at random objects and try to figure out how to make a 3D model out of them, how to create a pretty accurate 3D depiction of them. As a fun fact, maybe I may have mentioned this many, many years ago when I first started teaching this class, which is that one of the reasons why I started the How to CAD Almost Anything series has to do with the fact that when I taught this class, like a version of this class at a different university back in the day, my students challenged me to design a trumpet. Um, and so that resulted in the YouTube video that maybe you guys have seen in the channel that I show how to design a trumpet. That took a long time, but I realized that it's not trivial, obviously, how to design an object like a trumpet, and it took a lot of time. So then that went to the into the idea of saying, well, can I actually challenge myself to design essentially any object, right? And how could you use the tools that you have available, whether it's in Creo, whether it's in another CAD software, to arrive to that result? You're reverse engineering, looking at the design. You say, all right, these are the different features of my instrument or my object. How can I recreate those? So it's funny that this year's edition is purely based on musical instruments because it's as if life was full circle. So I'm very glad that that's the case. And this is a picture from this past IAP. So a few months ago, this one I update all the time to show that, well, we keep on teaching the class and you guys are the excuse for this to happen and then being able to share it to the world for other people to be able to learn and use these resources to self-teach themselves how to CAD. So what are some of the reasons why you decided to enroll in this year's edition? Well, it's really cool skill to have. I'm very interested in learning more about modeling. Of course, I think you will learn a lot. Designing musical instruments is cool. I definitely agree with that. Then cool to reverse engineer and customize musical instruments. I agree with that. There will be plenty of opportunities to make it your own. Obviously, pictures and these objects will act as references, but you, the designer, the engineer, will ultimately come up with a design. So you will be able to make your own custom guitar, your own custom euphonium, whatever it may be. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Potentially, if you later want to take your objects and 3D print them, as an example. More advanced things, for sure, great variety of projects from simpler to pretty advanced. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities to learn and get better. Comfortable with CAD, using CAD software for sure. We have a lot of time throughout this edition, 8 weeks, to practice a lot with all of the different projects. Learning Creo, I agree, it's industry standard for sure in some specific industries, so I'm glad that that's listed as one of the reasons. And mens et manus, not other than MIT's motto right there. So why Creo this year? Well, this is a screenshot from the OpenCourseware website. And as I was mentioning earlier, we've done already 5 CAD software in there. And I'm really hoping that we can add the final 6th one, as far as I'm concerned, which is going to be Creo. So that's a big excuse why to just teach it all with this. It is widely used in industry, if I'm not mistaken, especially in the automotive industry. So, for those folks that are interested in going in that particular industry, I think this will be useful. Even though, as I always like to say, if you learn one CAD software, you can master all of the other ones pretty easily. In fact, if you look at the syllabus of how this class is structured, it's pretty similar across the different CAD softwares. You have very similar tools, similar functionalities. What we emphasize here instead is the thought process, how you take the object and try to use those tools to get to that result. Then you'll figure out what tools you have available in the different softwares in order to make that a reality. So I'll be pointing out, as we use Creo throughout today and all of the subsequent sessions, that this is the tool that you have specifically in Creo, but what is the equivalent tool perhaps in other CAD softwares, in particular SolidWorks, which I think is one that is super common, especially for university students. It's true. One last thing that I'd like to mention in here is that Creo is free for students and educators. You can get a license for free. You do need a student email to do that, but that's a possibility. So also, in that mission of being able to democratize access to CAD education, it's important that we also teach this class using open source, like, or at least freely available software like Creo in this particular case. So that being said, I'd like to welcome you all finally to How to CAD Almost Anything, the 2026 edition. So some of our logistics is that, well, today we're gonna start with the xylophone, the pan flute, and the gong, and we're gonna go over some of the very initial features, right? It's how to do sketches, how to create extrudes, some of the different features, how to edit different sketches, color parts. So some of the essential building blocks, and we're gonna continue refining some of those in session two, when we learn how to use the spline, how to bring pictures and being able to trace them. So very similar syllabus to things that you may have seen in the past. Perhaps the biggest modification is that since this is the summer edition of How to CAD, we can afford to take more time in teaching it. So we're not quite in a rush like we're in IAP where we have to compress everything into 3 weeks. Instead, we're gonna take our time. We're gonna have one session per week throughout the next 8 weeks, with the exception of that particular week. So that will give us time to assimilate concepts, being able to practice them, and take our time really. And one thing that I'm super excited in particular about this year is that we'll have special sessions like session 3 and session 6, which in general, if you guys may remember from prior editions, these are like the famous session 2.5 or session, I guess, 4.5 in that particular case, where it's really a review of the concept that we learned on the prior sessions. So here we learn, the basic foundations in 1 and 2, and in session 3 we're going to apply all of that to make slightly more advanced objects than the ones that we've done in these two cases, but just using those commands. So it's just like, just trying to drill down on those things that we've learned. And the same thing in here. In 4, we learn super important things like mirroring, circular patterns, how to leverage symmetry, right, in your object. While on 5, another set of super useful commands which include loft and sweep, where you're trying to create more complex looking geometries, and that ultimately will be fully revised when we do session 6. An instrument like the accordion, which has all of those different flexible areas, that's not difficult to do, but it heavily builds on the commands that we learn on those two. So we'll just make sure that we learn that well, and we're gonna really establish the foundations on that session. And then finally on 7, this is more towards the latter portion of our class. We're going to look more towards assemblies, just bringing objects together. And I think the best case in here is to build like a little drum kit, or really like a bell kit with cymbals in there. So that's going to be fun too. And finally, session 8 is really the final of them all, where we're going to just put everything that we've learned together to make perhaps the two most complicated objects from our edition, which include a vertical piano and a euphonium. We'll see how much detail we give to both of them, but it should be fun. So a lot of variety of instruments. It's kind of front heavy because the first 4 sessions we're going to be cutting 3 objects per session, while the latter 4 only 2. But that's really to be able to assimilate the concepts as much as possible, build the foundation so that then we can do more advanced stuff in the future. Just some final notes before we jump straight into Creo is that we'll have a website as usual, which is this one right here. That's where we'll be posting all of the objects and all of the that we'll be cutting, and also all of the video links. For instance, this video, once it goes out to YouTube, the link is going to be available there. In terms of the classroom, will be as always at the GIS and Data Lab. It's open Monday through Fridays, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. You can use that space. And we'll be meeting, as you guys may know, on Wednesdays, 3 to 5. Now, one thing I should mention, which maybe you realize by the fact that I am speaking to you asynchronously right now, is the fact that based on feedback that I've gotten from prior years, and also how the class has been taught in the latest 2 or 3 iterations, I think it's useful to have 2 videos per session. So this is the first video of session 1, and this one is purely asynchronous. When I'm speaking to you, I'm gonna try to release these videos always before class. That way, if you have the time to watch them, you can watch them, and you can see exactly how I'm gonna be cutting these 3 objects. And I'm personally taking my time also to cut them, and I can explain them, I can show you how things are done, I can try different things. And these ones, as I'm saying, will always be posted before class, maybe a week before in general, if I have the time to do so. But then when the actual in-person session comes, I'll be going over the exact same things from that session in person. The problem is that we're only limited to a 2 hour window in there. So less time. And the idea there is that I will do a review of the same commands and generally CAD the same objects or a subset of the, say, objects that I have intended to do in that particular session, but simpler versions. That way you'll be able to, just assimilate some of the concepts, get the overall idea, and then you can try it out by yourself at a later time. Um, I think this setup should work out and you'll be exposed technically twice to the same concepts if you watch them asynchronously and then in person. And sometimes, the projects that I end up doing in person and asynchronously change a little bit in terms of the design. So there's going to be a wide array of different objects that you'll be able to cut by yourself by doing it this way. And well, here's the syllabus. Please check it out if you have any other questions. And these are the objects, by the way, that we did when we were using Inventor this past episode. Fairly complex. I think the instruments might not be as complex, say, as some of these, but it will still be super interesting to do. So, folks, let's get started. Today's session one involves the following three objects: a pan flute, a toy xylophone, and a gong. These are by no means difficult to do. I think it's not going to take us that much time to do them. We're going to have fun, we're going to be detailed with them, but honestly, not too complicated. The idea is to really see these are the commands that we have available in Creo. This is how we could make these three objects, which already, not too complicated, but it's already a lot, like in terms of taking the commands and being able to make fairly realistic depictions of this. So we'll be able to change the colors, we'll make all of these different features. Maybe if we're likely, we might add some letters to indicate, well, these are the different notes, right? Like, so A, B, C, D as an example. We'll be able to also add like the curvature in here. And yeah, so this is what we're going to be doing. We'll start in just a second by doing an overview of Creo. We'll go over the commands and then we're going to jump into each one of these. So let's go now to Creo. So now we are finally in the Creo interface. This is where we'll be working for the next couple of weeks. As you will hopefully see in just a minute, you will realize that this interface is actually very similar to other CAD softwares that you may have encountered in the past. If this is the first time encountering a CAD software, I'll make sure that I can describe what are the different things, how to best navigate this area. But it's fairly simple. Hopefully it's not going to be too complicated. The minute that you first enter here, this box is going to pop up in here. I'm just going to close it because we don't need that. And now we need to start doing things. In general, whenever you go to a CAD software, as this one in the case, you'll be creating things that are called parts. Essentially, you just draw, you make like a cube, you make a triangle, and you have a 3D object out of which you'll be able to subsequently build assemblies that consist of multiple parts. But in order to make a part in the first place, you need to make sketches. And sketches, as we'll see in just a moment, they define absolutely everything. It's all of the features that correspond to a part. So how do we do that? So you go here to where it says new, and I'm gonna select here where it says part. And when it prompts me for a name, I'm gonna say test one. You can leave this as use default template, maybe not. If there's things that you want to change, you can change them later, as I'm gonna show in just a minute. But I'll click on that, for example, and I'll click on OK. So now it's gonna take me over to the main Creo interface. So a couple of things before we get started is really to mention that you will see these three planes in here. They denote the 3D space where we'll be, and essentially everything that we'll draw from now onwards, parts, 3D models that come out of this will be defined with respect to these three planes, or to be more precise, the intersection of all of them, which denotes the origin. It doesn't matter where I draw something, as long as there's some reference with respect to the origin, the software will know where that part is in place. So it's super important that you always have that idea in mind. And I'm going to re-emphasize that in just a little bit. Eventually, we're going to select the plane where we're going to start drawing and building our 3D structure of that. And in subsequent lessons, we're going to learn how to create your own planes, which may be at certain angles or certain requirements that you might need. One thing is that you see my background here is white. I personally like it this way because I like to take screenshots afterwards of the 3D models. I believe when you first enter Creo, it may not necessarily be like that. So if that's something that you'd like to change, go here to where it says File, then over to Options, and where it says system appearance, you can change those objects in there. For instance, I was playing around with them earlier and I figured out that these ones would work. You can also go for white on black. I do not like that personally, but if you do, you could choose that too. But I'm gonna go back to black on white and say, okay. So that's one thing. The other thing is that, as I always like to say, units are really not important because essentially you can draw, you can scale, you can do whatever you want, and eventually you can scale everything back to whatever specific dimensions that you would need. The most important thing is that everything relative to the other dimensions is okay, but whether you use inches, centimeters, a meter, that I don't care what the numbers look like as long as the relative proportions are fine. That being said, I do like the SI unit system. So if you're like me and you would like to change that or control what unit you're using, you can go here to File as well, then go over to, I believe it's in Prepare. So click in there and then go to Model Properties. And there's a bunch of things that are going to appear here, which are mostly going to be defined from the default that we selected earlier. The one that I'm going to change in particular is this in here. So go here to change, and there's a little box that appears. So I'll do the usual centimeter gram second. If you're happy, click on Set and say, okay, it's going to change some stuff, and I'll click on Close. And I'm close. So you can see that it effectively changed in there. If there's other things that you're interested on, you can change them here. We might in the future, but for now, this is fine. So most of the things that we're going to do today in particular are going to be found in this area in here. We're only going to explore a few of these tools. Eventually, we're going to go deeper into seeing some things. So let's get started. Let's see how this Creo work. So the main thing, as always, is to start with a sketch. You do a sketch, and then out of a sketch, you can make a figure. There's a way actually in Creo where if you know the command that you want to use, for instance, extrude, which I'll explain what it is in a minute, you can first select the command and then do the sketch. But I prefer, it's like a chicken and egg kind of problem. I always prefer to start with a sketch and then figure out what can I do with that sketch. So here, click in sketch. And the first thing that you're going to prompt me, as you see here, is to select where are you going to draw that sketch. For instance, that plane, I click on sketch, good. So now if the canvas becomes like this, I should mention that if you go to this little button in there, it's gonna direct me towards the sketch view, which is gonna, I select that plane, so now we're parallel to that plane. If you look at your mouse, if you click on the scroll button, you can, there we go, you can rotate things. Meanwhile, if you click on shift and then scroll, you can pan. Those are two very important commands. So this is how you rotate by clicking on the ball button, shift and ball button, you can move around. I always like to see it in a slightly isometric view. This in here, the intersection of those two center lines, they correspond to the origin. So remember, everything that we'll draw will be with respect to that. But now let's go back to the top view of this sketch. So let's draw something. How about let's draw a square? So I'll click where it says line, which by the way, there's a ton of different commands you can explore, but we'll go simple for now. I'll click here in line and I'll draw a few, not quite a square, it's more like a trapezium. And I click on escape if I'm happy with this. Okay, what can I do? Well, I can drag, oh, when I do, sorry, Control Z in there, let me do that again. Let me draw. I click escape. So if I do click escape, what happens is that a lot of auto-generated dimensions will pop up, because what Creo is going to try to do here is to say, all right, I'm going to define where everything is in space. Good. You can use these ones, and you see they're colored blue. These are like these auto-generated dimensions. We can also specify those ourselves. In fact, we can also, this is what I was trying to do earlier. You can move, you can click in things, you can move, click on that line, you can rotate and see how all of these dimensions change. You may or may not want to use these ones. You may want to define your sketch in a different way. In fact, we need to know where all of this is with respect to the origin. So we'll do that in a minute. If you click on the letter D, and then you click on the line, and then you click on the scroll button, what you will see, so D, that activates this command in here that's called dimension. Then you click on the line, and then on the ball button of the mouse, it will allow you to define a dimension. So I click on 300. One thing to notice in here is that this dimension is black while all the others are blue. Black is because I enforced that one, meanwhile the other ones are like self-generated, auto-generated by Creo. So that's something important because, well, I'll explain why, but just to have that idea in mind. If I double click in here, I can say, all right, I want that to be 100. So things change. If I didn't like that for some particular reason, I can do Control Z and things will come back to normal. So again, I can click here in D, and then click in there, then remember the ball button, and now that's how that's gonna appear. So I can do 150 and whatnot. So you see that a lot of these things are like defined. The reality is that it's really asking us to specify that. So now that I changed that one to 110, from blue it became black, which means it's no longer self-generated. So no, let's do that on all of them. That one, you see, you could, for instance, want to reference the distance of that point to that line like that, or I could have used an angle. For instance, I could say, I want the letter D, and I want to make that 290 in there. And you know what I could do? I could do letter D to activate the dimension. Click on that line, and then scroll. And I can say, well, is that the angle that I want? I can say, well, so what's happening in here? It will allow us to create the angle, but it says that it's in conflict with some already pre-allocated dimensions. Like the 97, which I believe was, no, let's see if I find it. Well, it's in conflict with some of these dimensions. So what I might do is actually say undo in here. Let me see. Oh, I see. What happens if let me make that 100 in there. All right, so that's just in reference with that. But if I were to do D, click on those two, then ball, again, the same problem as before, but I could loosen things up if I say, all right, delete that 150, which seems to be what's making a problem right now. And now the problem disappears. So I can define things with respect to that. So I can say, well, that actually is supposed to be 100. That seems to be working in there. The same thing with now, boom. So this 100 and that 100, essentially they grab that point in there, and you see that it goes all the way there to that point. So now we kind of know where this figure is with respect to these two lines. So that's why I was doing that. You can also say, I want that to be 70. And now that line with respect to that one is like that. And so this is one of the things that you could do. There's also all of those commands right there, which we're going to use extensively throughout the next few weeks, which are called constraints. Well, what do they do? For instance, I could click here where it says parallel, click on that line, and click on that line. Now, this obviously is going to be in conflict with that 70 degree, but I believe it's that one, right? So which one is the I love it because it doesn't tell me really the numbers, but oh, I believe it's then that one in there. I'm gonna delete that one, and you see how I get rid of one of my prior constraints dimensions, and now this works. So now I can guarantee that this line and that line are gonna be parallel. That's what I did using that. I'm gonna click escape. That way I'm no longer in that command. You could also enforce perpendicular constraints between two lines. You could also say, I want these things to be like midpoint, horizontal, vertical, tangent. Tangent is a fun one, for instance, where you can say, well, I want, say that, and that to be that. Actually, no, it's not going to work with these two, but it would work, for instance, if I draw a circle, for instance, here. And now, one thing I want to mention is that I can click in, I'm going to go here, which is tangent, go here, and go here. And now it's as if it was sticking them both together right there. So I think that's actually super useful. We're going to use it a lot. And I'm going to leave it like that. But now I don't think we'll need that. We're going to draw circles. I'm going to continue explaining that in just a minute. One thing that is super duper important to realize is that when I drew this rectangle and I closed the shape, like in other words, I close the hole, this area becomes all shaded. And that's good because eventually we can be able to give some 3D volume to this thing later or do a bunch of other things. If, for instance, I click on that line and I delete it as an example, right? So I click and delete, you see that now this is no longer shaded. So I do Control Z to bring it back. Another thing that you could realize is that if I right click in that line and then I do like this, so right click and then left click, you see that this panel appears, which is what we saw earlier. The most relevant thing from here to see is that little button that in there that's called construction. What does construction do? So you click in there, and essentially it grabbed that line and it made it like transparent, like the line still exists. And for dimensional purposes, it's very useful because it's like a reference line, a construction line. But this is no longer shaded because in the face of the sketch, it's as if it was never there. Why are construction lines useful? Because if I'm told that, all right, I have a figure and I want to do a hole that is 5 centimeters from two edges, well, I would use the construction lines to denote that distance in there, 5 centimeters from one side, 5 centimeters from the other one, and I will be able to identify where I am. But let me do Control Z. I'll be using them a lot in just a minute. We're going to explore rectangle, circle, arches later. We'll come back to those in a minute. One thing I'll say is that, let me just show you what fillet and chamfer do. Fillet, for instance, if I click on these two lines, it essentially creates a radius. I can say, okay, good, escape. I want that guy to be 20. Now, this is very useful. However, this is possibly, and let me do chamfer as well. What does chamfer do? Let me click on that line. Let me click on that line. So it's as if it creates like a nice straight edge instead of a circle. Great tools. However, these are the last two times that I'm going to use chamfer and fillet within a sketch. These are two things that you could do afterwards once you have a 3D volume. I'd rather keep the sketch simpler and then add details like the chamfers, the fillet, like these rounded edges later on. I think it's a strategy that it has always worked. So I'm gonna get rid of those in there, especially because it like modifies the sketch properties, and sometimes I want to modify the radius. It's things that later on are easier to modify if the chamfer and the fillet were like features themselves. Okay, you have your sketch in here. You're happy with it. You click here on okay. So now I'm just gonna rotate our sketch, which now appears there as sketch 1 is denoted here. By the way, this area of Creo, it's called the feature tree. It's a super duper useful place because everything that we draw is gonna keep on popping up in there. And this line, it's like the progress bar, is gonna really kind of denote like where we are in space, like where we are in the timeline. So I might be able to move the bar up and down and say, well, this is how much progress I've done up to this point, up to that point, and so on and so forth, which might be able to, it's like a nice way to go back in time and modify, say, mistakes that you could have done, as an example. But suppose you're happy with this, then what I'll do is here, we're gonna do our first extrusion. We're gonna give this 3D volume. So it's gonna prompt us to select something. So I'm gonna select here sketch 1. And the first thing that you realize is that, well, it's gonna ask us how big do you want to make this thing. So I'll say 200. I click on enter. And voila, that's pretty good. You could modify, you'll be able to realize later on when we do other sketches, there's ways to be a little bit more precise with how you do your extrusions using some logic. But for now, this is what matters in here. So I'm gonna click on okay. Good. So we have our first extrusion. That's fantastic. So now you see that it appears there, and sketch 1, now it became hidden, even though I could right click in there and click on my eye. And now it's appearing through the blue lines, but I do not want it yet. I'll just leave it hidden because all I wanted is this. And we have all of our planes, which, by the way, we could also hide, but I'm not gonna do that because we kind of need them right now. Okay, so we got that in here. What else can we do? Well, a couple of things that we could say is the fillet that I was mentioning and the chamfers. These are features that appear right here. For instance, I can click here where it says round, and I can click on that edge, that edge, that edge, and that edge. And now we have them all appearing here, and I can specify a radius of 10 as an example, right? But 10, if I'm not mistaken, is only going to be on number 4. Because, for instance, I can make number 3, which is the one in there, 5, and make 2 like that. I can make that 1, and so on, and say, okay. So you see now each one of these have different values. The same thing goes for chamfer. I can select here, I can select like the entirety of that, actually not that face, so I'm gonna I don't think that's gonna work. You're gonna say yes. Let me go here again to chamfer. So I'm gonna select that edge again. So you see how it selects like an entire chain. It's not gonna be able to work if you select just one particular line. But I can say, all right, I want that to be, let's say 20. So it's a pretty significant change in there. And I click on OK. Very good. Can you modify these things? Suppose your boss comes and they tell you, folks, you've done a terrific job, but some of these dimensions are off. You need to change them. Absolutely, you can do that very easily. You can go right here, go to which says edit definition, and you can change that number to be 10. And when you're happy, always remember to click OK. Good. Same thing with round. You could go to edit definition, and you can change each one of these numbers to whatever you might need. So I can make that 5. And then, so it's always regenerating. But this is why these sorts of softwares are great, because they're called parametric. You're defining the parameters in here. It's all mathematically defined in space. So that's pretty good. And you can also do the same thing about your original sketch. I can go here to extrude one. And well, actually, one last thing. I'll go here and you can also edit your height. For instance, that could have been 100 as an example, and it would accordingly modify itself. Or even better, I can go to sketch one and edit that sketch. So for instance, what if, let's see, a fun one, what if that was 400? So now the shape looks like that. I'm gonna click on OK. Voila, it just regenerates all of it. This comes to speak to the reality that every time you do a sketch, you see how much of an influence it has downstream in whatever you do. So as long as you do your diligence and provide sufficient dimensions in that sketch, if you have a mistake or you want to modify certain things, it's going to be super easy. You just go back and you modify that. By the way, what I was mentioning about the feature tree, if I move the line in there, you see that now the chamfer doesn't appear, right? This is everything that we've done up to here, but then I'm gonna bring it down and voila, it regenerates all of those. So that's another important thing to have as as you want to check on your progress or when did I do this feature or what is this feature, that you can look like that. Well, another thing that you could do is also that you could rename some of these things in here. So I can call that edges with many S's, like that. So at least you can better tell what you're referring to. Every time you also highlight them, it's gonna show you in the actual part what does it correspond to. Good. What else can we do from here? Well, if you go here to view and you click on appearances, I'm gonna click right there, you could change the color of this thing. For instance, I can make this like brass, and then if I go down here, it can be like intense surface. This generally corresponds to it's a connected surfaces that it knows they will connect. So I can go here and then click on control, then on control, and then once I'm happy, click on the ball. So now all of that is copper, but that face. Now let's click again here, and now remember to change it to. I could also say I want the entire body to be, I don't know, let's say gold as an example, right? Well, I think I forgot to change in there, but you start to get the idea. Let me go here again. Let me go to body. There we go. Oh, you could also go here and select all of that stuff, and it's gonna change it automatically as well. So these are just some tricks. The thing that's gonna be fun is that if I believe that's what I did when I was doing body. If now I do an additional extrusion, which we can do in just a minute, it should still be gold as well, because that's what I made the body color. So let's see. So I'm gonna go back to model. So that is here appearances. We're gonna be using that a lot, especially when we do musical instruments. We wanna change the colors and whatnot. Actually, since we're speaking about appearances, one thing that I like is that this is my favorite way of displaying the figure, which is called shading with edges. You could change a few things in here. You could do just shading. You could do no hidden. The problem about this one is that it's nice, but the more complex your part becomes, it's gonna take a toll in terms of the graphics. So sometimes if you go for the shading, which is like this, and it doesn't show the lines, sometimes this one consumes less memory. Just another important thing to have in mind as we go into like more difficult things later on. But for now, this should be fine. Okay, what can we do? So now we can do another sketch. But the fun thing is that now we could either start from one of the original planes that we had at the beginning, or we could choose any face of this figure. For instance, I can check that face in here, and I go here to sketch. I'm like, okay, so if I go over to my friend, the sketch view, you see, this is where it takes us. This is the face where we are gonna be working from. So what about drawing a rectangle? Suppose these are my requirements. I want a rectangle that is whose edge is 5 centimeters from here and 5 from there. How would I draw that? Well, you would go here to line, but I'm gonna go to this that's called construction mode. So I'm gonna draw a little line that goes like that, and another one that goes like that. I click on escape, then letter D. Well, actually, it's already defined for us, but I'm gonna maybe, there we go. I'm gonna make that actually 25 because the numbers are a lot bigger. You would imagine 25. You see the dimensions become black, which indicates that I have like fully defined those. Like, so it's not really that the line itself changes color, which is something, an important distinction with SolidWorks, but the dimension line does from blue to black. So you have that, and now what we can do is go here to rectangle, but don't forget to go out from the construction mode. So I'm gonna draw here, and you see that actually there's many different types of rectangles. You could draw a center rectangle in which you select the origin and the point. I'm gonna go for this one is point. So let's do that. And voila, I have a rectangle. I'm gonna click escape, and you have the auto-generated dimensions. I could say 200. Now something just for the fun of it, right? I can do a construction line that goes from here to here. And the reason why I'm doing this is because what if I didn't want that 39? What if I wanted to define it in terms of the diagonal? So I click on D, I click on that. Oh, let me go here, back to D. There we go. Let me go to the ball. Okay, is it working? There we go. Now I had to like click in the correct place, not in the plane. So now you see how that one disappeared because I'm gonna fully define the dimension of this rectangle based on the diagonal. So let's make that 203. And see how it accordingly modifies itself. So this is great. So now what we can do is we can go over to our friend. Well, actually, we'll go here to OK. No other things to define. And now if we go to extrude and I click on OK, you see that's gold color, as we had anticipated earlier, which means that if you change the color of the body, every other subsequent feature is also gonna have that color. However, you could, if you went here to view, appearances, and suppose you want to make that gray, you could, select like this. I'm just hitting Control to make sure that all the faces are selected. Then I click on the ball, and now that changes color too. Important. It's an important thing to know. Then what else can we do? We can go back to the model. We can do, why not? Let's make that round in there. So by default, that's gonna be 5. I can make that 10, like that. Let's make that. So it gives you really a lot of control in terms of how you're doing it, and it's just a single feature in there. And I'm gonna go here too. Another thing before I check is that it's like circular, but there's different ways of defining your fillet, and I think it's so powerful in terms of the sort of different things that you could conceive. And I'm gonna go here to OK. Now the problem is that again our body is gold, which is why when we made those little fillets in here, that they look as gold, because the only thing that we had changed in here were the colors of just the face. So that's an important thing to know. So let's continue drawing stuff. So now I can go back to sketch. I'm gonna select that face. I'm gonna click on sketch. Now we're gonna go to our friend, this one, just to really make sure that we're in the correct place. And now let's draw a circle. Suppose I want a circle that is, I don't know, like 5 from here and 5 from there. How would you draw it? So I'm gonna go here to construction mode, line. We're going to draw a little line that goes like that, escape. And now, all right, let's give that 50. And what about that? Let's make, I see what's going on. Like there's something about the midpoint here. So I'm going to get rid of that constraint and hopefully it should allow us to operate with this smoothly. I'm going to go here to 50 and good. That is where we want this to be. Excellent. So our lines are correct. I'm going to click on escape. And now suppose I wanted to do a circle that goes here. And I want to make that 50. I wonder what happens if, oh, interesting. So I think I think that 50 never matter. We should have used that 50 right there. Good. I mean, it was like, with respect to something else, I'm really not sure. It was with a different point. So you have to always be careful whenever you establish dimensions. We have our circle now, all of the different dimensions look black, which means I've all defined them. And so what we can do is now go here to OK, and then extrude this thing. But what if I wanted to make a hole as an example? What you could say is remove material in here, and then change the orientation. You don't want to remove upwards, or there's nothing upwards. You want to go down. A few things, right? That from here, where it says depth, I could say to next, which means up to that face, as an example. I could also say to reference, in which case make it up to that face, as an example. Or I could say variable. I can say I just want that to be 20. In which case, it makes like a pocket in there. So just a lot of control in terms of what you'll be able to do. So I'm gonna click here on OK. And then once again, we can go to chamfer. I can click that edge in there. So now it's gonna look very nice. We can say that's 5, enter, OK. Good. So now this is starting to take shape in there. Some other things that you could do if we go back to the sketch, and I'm gonna go back here to sketch. There's other things you have like splines, you have arches. These are all things that we're gonna use a lot in the future. Not really today because it's unless you have a very specific application, right? But these are things that they will definitely pop up, especially when you have like specific needs for them. One last thing before we actually get started with our three projects of today, and we finish this overall overview of Creo, is one very important command, which is text. So text, it allows you to write, and we're gonna definitely use a lot of writing in here. So one of the first things I like to do is that whenever I write text, I want to know, well, is there a line where that text is gonna be oriented on? So what we can do is create a construction line. I can do here line. And I can choose, for instance, just to practice a little, right? I have that line and I can do, go here, this says parallel. And I want these two and those two to be parallel. So at least, you can see another application of our series of constraints in here, which by the way, you could modify later on if you wanted to, but at least it's just one way to do it. And then I'm gonna go here to, let me just exit construction mode. There we go. Otherwise, I'm not gonna be able to select it. I'm gonna go here to text. I'm just gonna right click there, doesn't matter where. And I'm gonna write the word CAD. You see it's starting to appear in there. A couple of things that you can modify is that you can change the font. You can make it like Arial as an example. So many different choices you can come from, and you could probably like import too. I want to use that in there. But where it says place along curve, that's what we're interested on. I'm gonna click that line in here. There we go. So now you see how the word CAD appears there. It's too big. We're gonna change it in a minute. Now I want this to be centered, so it appears right there. And I'm gonna click OK. We have our 65. Let's make that 20. So now it's like more presentable. It's a right size. If you were to again double click, you could change stuff. But if you unclick place on curve and now you click it again, and I select that line, that happens. And you can also change the orientation, a couple of things. Let me go back here. There we go. I'm gonna click on OK. Good. Why do I care about this? Is because now we can go to OK, finish, and let's extrude. So we can give this even more volume. I can say 10. So we've been able to do like a fairly, I'm not sure really what this is. This could be, like when you're, if it was a musical instrument, like one of those ones where you have a little drumstick and you're hitting, I forget the name. I do not know the name of all of the instruments, but it could be one of those. But you have in here, we've done already a lot. And this set of commands that we've looked at today is essentially going to be enough for our applications that we're going to start doing in just a minute. So let's jump into our projects. So we go here to our tab. I have all of our pictures. So we have our xylophone, our toy xylophone. We have the gong, and we have the pan flute. So let's do that. So I'm gonna go here to file part. So I'm gonna call this toy xylophone. Let me see whether that works. Good. Now we know the answer to that question, which, by the way, one thing I would have to mention is that you would have to save your parts in here. So I'm going to go here to desktop as an example, and you can call it toy xylophone and say, okay, good. And your other part is still here. I'm going to save it to desktop. I'm going to call it test one. Okay, good. I'm gonna go back here. So how would we do this? Well, let's look at a picture of our toy xylophone. So here's what I would suggest. I think that we can start by drawing a rectangle that's gonna act as a piece. And then we can draw another sketch that will be for all of those two legs. Now, just for the sake of it, we could add a little connector that goes in there, because why not? And then we can go one by one, drawing each one of these little pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I guess it would be 8 nodes in here. And then we can add all of those little buttons. So how would you do that? Very, very simple. So let's go here to sketch. Let's select our plane in there. Let's go here to sketch. And let's go over here. There we go. So in rectangle, we're going to use the center rectangle. I'm going to click like that. Escape. It will ask us for dimensions. Don't you worry. I think this is going to be fine. So I'm going to click on, for instance, let's say 100 in there. And let's make that 400, right? So that roughly looks, maybe I'll make that 75. Excellent. And I'm gonna go here to OK. So then the next thing that we can do from here is go over to our friend the extrusion, and it seemed that maybe we can do 80, to be honest. So just not quite a rectangle, was like not quite a square, was a little bit higher in my opinion. Yeah, well, at least this is our take. Now, if you look at the pieces of wood, they're slightly lower in height. So how would you do that? Well, it's not that difficult. What we can do in here actually is the following thing. I'm gonna go here to I'm gonna go here to sketch. I'm gonna go here to that face in there. I'm gonna go here to sketch. So now we are again inside that plane, the bottom side of this thing. So we can draw the two extensions that come from our piece. So for this is where construction lines will come very handy. So I'm gonna draw a bunch of lines in here that will really define our overall sketch. Right, so I'm gonna now get rid of those, just draw some regular lines. So to look in there, we can give this some height. Or also I can say, right, I want the distance between here to be 30. Good. And we'll need that too. I'm gonna draw a line here. Another line there. By the way, this is where we can start to use the constraints, because I can say are equal. I'll select those two, and you see that now those two lines are equal. Hence, if I modify this parameter, let me escape. Now, if I modify that and I make that 100, you see it automatically changes all of that stuff. Now, I'm using that as a reference. So in terms of angle, this seems all right. Maybe what I would do is I would make that 90. I think that that's perfect. But the thing that we need to do is make sure that, let me click on the point, scroll, there we go. So 30. Now we have our figure in here. So we're gonna draw another line that goes like that. And we're gonna do another line that goes like, so it kind of, it's detecting stuff. As you can see, it's automatically parallel because of the way that we've drawn this. That's good. I'm gonna kind of complete these two like that. There we go. And now the last thing that we will need to define is, well, how thick do we want these two beams to be? So based on in there, doesn't need to be like that thick per se. So maybe, I'd say 40 would be okay. And we could either say equal, select that, both. I might make them 38. Why not? So what does this allow us to do? Then we are happy with this. We click on OK, and now we go to our friend the extrusion, and it automatically detects these areas. So we can obviously change the height. So if we made the previous one 80, we could possibly make this 70. Maybe that's maybe 65. Let's see. Yeah, I think that should definitely work. So we have all of those pieces in here. That seems mostly all right. It's gonna be sitting in there. And then we're gonna obviously add like a little beam in there just to make sure that things are fine. So I'm gonna click on okay. Now, one thing that is nice in here, but I do wanna change is that I don't want this to end like parallel like that. I want to make a little change just for my own sake, which is the following thing. I'm gonna go here to sketch and select that face in here. And I'm gonna say sketch, good. And I'm gonna select here the line, and I'm gonna do a little line. It's gonna be a little triangle, it's gonna go like that. And I'm gonna explain what this means in just a minute. But what I'll do is go here to my friend perpendicular and make these two perpendicular. Hold on, let me perpendicular, 1, 2. I think that should be it. Let me do the same thing here. No. There we go. Now, yes. Oh, there we go. Perfect. And now, what I would like to do is go here to finish and then go to extrude. And we're gonna remove material and we'll say, we can say floor as an example, right? And then click on OK. So now it looks as if the wooden bricks were actually finished in there. I know it's just a tiny detail, but I think it's important. And then we can go here to round, and then we can say, all right, actually, we're gonna round those two edges in there. We can make that 7.5. Actually, all of them. There. Very good. Excellent. So now we have them. I think one of them is not. Let me the definition. This one is not. There we go. Now, yes. I'll click on OK. So now we have our rounded edges here on our figure. And then now we can actually, there's one last thing I kind of want to do, which is the following thing, where we are gonna do now a sketch here on this face, just to make this look realistic, even though it's a fairly simple model. And now I'm gonna do a rectangle that goes like this. Excellent, just like that. You will see what this means in just a minute, but I'm gonna make that dimension maybe 400, and this one, yeah, just maybe 500, doesn't matter, because now I'll go here to OK, then we'll go over to extrusion. We're gonna remove material, but only 5 centimeters, maybe 10 actually. We would need to change the direction. Are we? There we go. Okay. So now this looks as if the blocks have been inserted there. And now in the theme of this piece, we're going to do the exact same modification that we did earlier, where I'm going to go here to sketch that face. Good. And now we're going to try to create 2 little triangles that are going to go just like that. And now let's do it here. And now we go here to perpendicular, and I'm changing. I click on those 2. Perpendicular, excellent. And now we go here to, well, actually, sketch. I am happy with that. Okay. And now we can go here to extrude, remove 10. Oh no, I'm like, there we go. Actually, yes. Right, let me just try again. Extrude. Is that I'm clicking the wrong button in here. There we go. Okay, excellent. And now we can go back to our friend the round. There we go. One thing to mention is that the very first number that you do include is going to be copy pasted into all of them. So that's why, like, you do here like 7.5. Just one thing in case you didn't want to like kind of replicate it in all of them, right? If you didn't want to change them manually. I click on OK. So now we have like a little stand in here. So we're adding slowly details to a little xylophone. So now I'm going to go here to round and select, for instance, if I did that, like, let's do 15 as an example, right? You see how 15 is now the one that's going to be replicated on all the other ones that come later. But now, if I were to edit the definition in here, and I change that to 20, only that one is going to change. So that's one thing to bear in mind. Good. So now this is moving along pretty nicely overall. Then perhaps the one thing that we could try to do is like a little connection in here between the 2 blocks. So how could you do that? Well, actually, it's not too difficult. What I would do is go here to sketch, and I select that face in here, go here to sketch, and now I'm gonna do a construction line that will be between that point and that point, escape. And now I wanna select a center rectangle, and well, don't forget to remove the construction mode. There we go, just like that. And yeah, we can make that 20, and make sure that the length is, we go here to D, there we go. Oh, let me change that. Yeah, let's change that one. Let's make this 130. We'll leave it like this. And now what we can do is go here to OK. And I'm gonna go over to extrude, opposite direction, but not 75. We're probably gonna extrude, let's say 40. So I want that to end here. And what I'll do is that I'll also want this Let me see what here. Yes, I'll leave it like that. I'll say okay. And I'm gonna go over to sketch in here, okay. And I'm gonna just draw a triangle, a rectangle that's gonna go all the way like that. Okay. Extrude, remove material, but not as much, maybe like 10. Or yeah, 10 is fine. Maybe 15. Good. And as always, you could make that rounded edge. Yeah, let's make it rounded edge. I think that should be fine. So make sure that let's make it 5. Let's select all of these edges. We go, okay, good. So we're essentially done because now we have the bulk of our figure in here. It's probably a great time to make sure to save this. And once actually now that we are here, this is like the wooden part. So let's actually color this just to save us some problems later. So I'll select all of this stuff. Go here. Actually, let me see whether there's any other. You could add a few more fillets, but I think this is a sufficient level of fillets for now in terms of the edges that I would like to have rounded. Maybe on the top side, it could be useful to have some stuff. There we go. Let me just move this in here. Yes, I'm just like thinking for a minute if I want to include more. You know what? We could. Oh, let me just in here. Let me see how that would look like. So let me go here to round. Okay, you know what? Let's leave that. And now let me do. I'm gonna make that 2. Excellent. So it's like super subtle, but I think this should look nice. Oh, now, yes. So we're gonna go here to view appearances. So what do we have available? So we go here and then we can go to, let's see, wood, ash, maple, um, cherry, spruce. How about spruce? So let's check this. And I'm gonna select all of this stuff. Actually, this looks kind of nice. I do like the spruce finish on of this thing. So now this is our colored piece. So I recommend to perhaps go coloring as you go. So this is our xylophone. And then, so let's look here at the picture. So now let's add all of these little pieces. So how do we do that? Well, so we have 8 and they're like equally spaced. So let's do some math in here. So what I'll do is I'm gonna go over to model, then sketch, and I'm gonna select this face in here. So the first thing that we can do is here, sketch. So we're gonna start drawing from here. So we can draw, actually, I'm gonna start by drawing a construction line that goes all the way like that, and then goes from here all the way there. Good. So now we roughly know where we are in space. And now I want to finish that mode and I'm going to build like a center rectangle. Yeah, like somewhere, doesn't matter. Good. And what I can say is I want this line, if I go here to tangent, I want that line and that edge to be tangent. So this is how I know that it's exactly on the edge, which is what we kind of wanted. So at least that's defined on that orientation. And we can make that block be 40, but we don't want, let me see. Why does it, why is that so big? I'm trying to figure that out. See, undo. Let me just look at the picture again. Yeah, maybe, let's see. Maybe I might get rid of that. There we go, and I'll make that. Oh, I see. Because these lines are not all fully defined. So what we would need to do is go here, draw another line. We're gonna go from here to, let's see. Actually, I'm gonna click on this line. I'm gonna click on those two and make them coincident. Let's see. There we go. It's just a function of really playing around with how you're drawing your lines here. Don't worry much about this one. But let me see. Let me see whether I can define the dimension in there. 42. See what happens if I delete that one and I say, you know what, I'm gonna just start. I'll just start again. There we go. So let me just do it. I'm just gonna draw a line that's gonna go. Let's see, where is our friend the origin? I should have done that in the first place. So I'm gonna draw this, and I'm gonna do a rectangle that's gonna be referenced like that. We're gonna make this one be, I want these blocks to be maybe 45. This one to be 200, the very first one. And maybe we can make this distance be, actually, I could play around with this. There we go. I got 45. Let's make that 500. Excellent. Okay. So I'm happy with how this is looking like in there. The key right now is that now we have to replicate this pattern a few times. So we have to draw a few rectangles and make sure that they are in their right positions. Now, the key about this is that I kind of also want to make sure that they're equally spaced. And there's a way to do that. The first thing that we have to do is actually start placing Alrighty, so that took a minute, but now we have all of the dimensions laid out in here. It's just a little bit tricky. You have to have a lot of patience whenever you're drawing this, but hopefully all of this effort will be paying off. Because now I'm gonna click on OK. Now we have all of our different sets of like little xylophones drawn out in here. This should be 8, just making sure, just for a second. So now what we can do is go here to extrude and voila. I mean, not quite voila yet, but at least it's getting there. So we're gonna click on 15. That way it's shown all the way like that. I'm gonna click on OK. You see how they're all appearing in their own color. And now what we can do is go to our friend round. And we can select, actually, I cancel yes. I go back to round. I'm gonna make that 5. There we go. And now I'm gonna select slowly each one of these. So that's gonna be 32 in total. So like 8 times 4. Very good. 1, 2, 1, 2. Just like that. Not that one. I think 16. I can delete it. There we go. That's also a nice thing to point out is that you can control all of your selections in here. There we go. Just like that. Am I missing one? No. I go to OK. Ah! So now we got all of these puppies drawn out in here. Now, if you want to be a little bit, so I'm realizing a couple of things that maybe this length with respect to that is a little bit too long, so I might correct that in just a second. Maybe I might change some of the internal dimensions of this thing. So I'll do that while, I want to play some background music, that way you're not bored. And then I'll be back with you when I'm going to add some letter items in here. So I'm going to call this A, B, C, D, and so on and so forth. So I'll do that in just a second. For now that we have this thing, let's add the letterings in here. So how would you do that? Well, I'm going to go here to sketch. When I click here on that face, I click on sketch. Now I'm going to create that line that we're going to use as a guide to draw all of our letters. So I'm going to go here to line, construction mode. I'm going to draw it always like this. I'll make it one continuous line that's going to go, like I kind of want it always to be around the same height. And you will see why I'm being so deliberate in writing them like that, right? So I'm gonna leave this like this, and now I can move it, doesn't quite matter. But now we can go here, let's leave construction mode. Let's click here in text. And I'm gonna be like, all right, I'll just draw your letter there. Let's call this A. So let's do an A to A scale as an example. So we'll leave it like that. Maybe let's do Arian. Let's click on OK. But now a critical thing is that we need to place on curve. So now that's there, and let's make it center. Okay, and now that we have our letter roughly there, let's make that 40, and now we can play around. Oh, I see. Let's play around. There we go. Because I want this to be roughly in the middle, right? So there we go. Okay, I think that should be fine. So now let's continue adding letters. So I'm gonna write the next one here. Let's call this B. Place a long curve. Let me select there. Then let's do the center. Let's do area. Let's do OK. So now let's make that 40. That way, all of them will be the same height and so on and so forth. So let me add all of those letters and I'll be back with you. Okay, so there we go. We got all of our letters. So go here to OK. So we're gonna extrude these slightly downwards. So I'm gonna go here to extrude. We're gonna do remove material and we'll do 1 millimeter. And there we go. I'll click on OK. Good. So we're almost done. We have one last thing that we have to do from here. So we have to add, as you know from this picture, all of those little tiny holes in there. So how do you do that? Well, that's not difficult at all. We just have to draw a center line and go through a similar process where we're just drawing, circle, circle, circle. We can even mirror it. The thing is that today it's a more like Karate Kid in the sense of that we are going through perhaps a slightly more difficult process that takes more time, when in reality all of this stuff could be achieved in much less time. But let's do it. So I'm gonna go here to sketch, select this face in here, and what we can do is the following thing. I'm gonna go here to sketch, and now we're gonna draw a line that will go from. Actually, I'll have to show you guys one command, which is super important in the context of this. There's a command that's called project, which is right here. What project does is that it brings that line as an example to my current sketch. In essence, it's doing a projection. I will bring this up later on, but it's an important one to use here because now I have that little line in there, and I'm gonna do the same thing with that guy in there. And I'll click on escape. Well, did it project? Yes, I think I'm gonna project that guy too. Excellent. Now I'm good with that. Now, yes, I can underline. I will go from the middle of that to roughly like that. Well, actually, what I'm gonna do is a line that goes from the middle of this one to the middle of that one, just like that. But at least now I kind of know where I am in space, which is super important. Actually, in fact, I'm gonna continue projecting more stuff. So let me do projections in here. So I'm gonna actually rule base. I'm gonna do partial loop. So let's see if it allows me to. I'll show you special again. That's fine. Yes, let's see. Oh, I see. No, cancel. I'm just gonna hit on control in order to be able to select all of these. 1, 2, so on and so forth. Just like that. There we go. Excellent. So now we have all of those little lines. So now, yes, we're gonna do the following thing where I'm gonna go 1, 2, 2, then like that, then like this. And why is this important? Because the middle of that line is gonna correspond to where I'm gonna place my little circle. I'm gonna go like that. Sometimes it's more parallel than others, but it's okay. Good, and that one is parallel like that. So what can we do based off from this? Well, I'm gonna go here to circle. I'm just gonna place a bunch of circles. So you see that all of these are the same, so then I'll make it, they're all equal radius, which is fine. But now let me make that one and that one equal too. Okay, I will go here to equal. select that, very good. So now let's make it 20. Now it barely made a difference. Oh, and I forgot, by the way, to add another circle here. There we go. Now they're all the same size. We're almost there, which, by the way, we should add another circle here. So I'm gonna do that too. So we're just gonna create holes for now. Then we're gonna create, what would it be? Then we're gonna add like a slightly extrusion from there that's gonna represent the actual pin where all of this stuff is would be sitting on. Yeah, the same thing goes with that. So let me just do, let me go here to construction, here to project. Good. And now I'm gonna add a line that goes like this, and then a line that goes from here to there. Good. I'm gonna add one final circle. That's gonna go like that. Excellent. Now what we can do is click here in OK. Then we'll go here to our friend extrude. And now we're gonna remove material and we're gonna say 14. So that will leave us all the way down to where we were. I'll say OK. Voila. We're getting there. Let me just see one. Oh, there's one thing I should say. Let me just edit definition in here. Is that is at 15, which is why it didn't appear. So one thing that I'm gonna do is I'll say symmetric and I'll make that 28. I'll say okay. Now, so it's gonna make 14 downwards, 14 upwards. So now you have all of those guys appearing right there. One last thing that we're gonna do from now onwards is that, well, yes. So perhaps what we can do from here is, okay, if we click on our extrude in here, our extrude 10, and I go here to mirror, then if I select the mirror plane and I go to that guy in there, this is gonna appear. Now, I was not meaning to do mirroring today because this is just a little bit of an advanced tool that we're gonna leverage later on. But given that this is like so much work to be able to have to replicate everything by hand, this is how we're doing it in here. So at least you have the little xylophone almost in there. So what I'm gonna stop for now, for a second, is that I'm gonna start coloring this stuff. And once I'm done coloring, I'm gonna do the very last step that we're gonna do together. So let's go ahead and do that. Alrighty, so I ended up changing some things because I realized that one little flaw that we have in here is that whenever like you made this as a single feature, which is what we had done, I cannot color these individually. I've tried, I was looking this up, and it's just not possible to change just individually each one of these faces to have a different color. So I'm sorry for that, but at least this doesn't look too bad. It's not quite the toy xylophone that we were aiming for in terms of like each individual color, but we're not quite done. Let's do the very last step in here, which is adding those little pins in there. So how would you do that? Well, an approach for doing that is going here to model, as always, then sketch in this one face in there. And now what we can do is, again, now select there, we can copy like the same profile of all of these circles and then extrude them upwards by giving, we need a little offset in there. So let's see, let me try to see whether that could work. Let me see. Hold on, let me go here to offset. Let me try. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna do it in a different way. Let me first start by doing project. I'm gonna project all of these little circles. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. Now we click on the ball button once we're happy. We have all of these. Great. So now what we have to do is go here. I want to select all of them. Oi. Okay, there we go. Now I want to select all of them and make them construction. Let me see. There we go. I kind of don't need them yet. And now that we have them all in there, I'm gonna make another set of circles. But I don't want these to be constructions. There we go. So you remember with the classic approach, these are all gonna be the same size as long as that one in there is gonna be referenced, as you can see. It's color red. Very good. And now I'm gonna modify them in just a second. And we're gonna, so we made each one of these little blocks, we made them out of aluminum, so we're gonna make them out of steel probably as our new material. So let's make that 15, maybe more. Something like that. Okay, good. So now let's extrude upwards. That's perhaps too much. So maybe let's do 15. No, the 15 is too little. 18. Right. Excellent. I think this is fine. Yes. And now what I want to do is I want to let's try in there. Okay, that seems fine. But what about 3? Okay, I kind of like 3. I select all of those guys. Boom. There we go. That is good. I click on OK. Excellent. So now let's wrap up by changing the colors of these guys too. So how do you do that? Again, we go here to view, appearances. So this time, let's see whether we have steel. And I'm gonna go over to where it says intent surface. So it's like that's how it recognizes that. There we go. And I click on the ball. Nice. Actually, doesn't look bad at all. So then let's do one last thing, which is here, go to model. This I'm kind of, getting a little bit ahead of myself. But this is something I was gonna, look in a later session, but it's okay. We do it today, which is going over to, if I click on round and on extrude 11, I have to hit control to select both of them at the same time. Go here to mirror, and then mirror plane will do our friend in here. I will go to OK, and you see that even the color is mirror, which is fantastic. So there we go. We got our little toy xylophone. So let me just hide these guys in here. And there we go. That way you can see it better. We can play. Maybe, you know what thing? I'm going to change one last item in here. I kind of want to make these guys be rounded. I think that looks a little bit better, but I might need to change. Let me go here to view, appearances. Let's go back to aluminum. Let's check that guy. Let's do intent surface. Good. Oh, so it was already kind of colored like that. Now, yes. Now I'm actually satisfied with this piece. Okay. Now we're going to continue with the other two in just a second. Alrighty. So now that we have the xylophone design, we can continue with the next project for today, which hopefully, given the experience that now we have designing the xylophone, should be much easier to do. And this is, as you're looking right here, it's the gong. The gong actually is gonna be much simpler to do, to be honest, because we're not gonna. given that I'm gonna try to limit the amount of tools that we learn today, we're gonna try to keep it simple. But in essence, the way that we're gonna start is I will do the base, so rectangle, 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 and then we'll do two columns that are gonna go next to it, and then another rectangle. So we'll do the frame, and then we'll do this part with the two little parts that are hanging from there. So I suggest we get started. So to do that, I'm gonna go here to File, New, Part. Let's call this one now Gong. I'll say, okay, excellent. So now really to make sure one of our things, we can go here to File, prepare, Model Properties. And so I'm gonna change, as always, the units as we did last time. Set, okay, close, excellent. Now we're just making sure that that's the case. This is already white, so I don't need to change that part. So let's start designing. So I'm gonna go here all the way to Sketch. I'm gonna select this plane, here to Sketch, and now we're there, as always, toggling around. So I'm gonna start with a good old second-tier rectangle. Let's make that, by the way, as I always say, dimensions don't quite matter here, but it's important to get them roughly correct. Maybe let's make that 25. I'll say, sure, that looks okay. And now we're gonna extrude, and we're gonna make the first one a height of, maybe that's too much, about 5. Good. So we got the first one of these rectangles that we have in here from our gong design. Let's add 3 more. So how could you do that? Well, I'm gonna go back to Sketch, go to that face, and click on Sketch. So now we're gonna be drawing in there. And now, yes, I'm gonna use one of the commands that I wanted to use just a second ago with the xylophone, which is this one that's called offset entities. So if I click, for instance, on that line, well, let me just change. If I only click on one line, essentially it's just creating the same line exactly like it, but at an offset of 20. What I think it's fun is if I go here to this check mark in here, and I go to where it says rule based, and let's try full loop as an example, then it's gonna create a little loop. It's like an offset of that rectangle inwards. So I can say, all right, actually make it offset it by 2. I'll say, okay, well, that's great, because now I'll do an extrusion of that one also by 5. So now we have our second layer defined, all nice and secure in there. Then we'll do like chamfers and whatnot later on. But now I'm gonna go back to Sketch, to this face, Sketch, and let's do the exact same thing. I'm gonna go back to offset entities, in here, selection, rule-based, complete loop. And I think, how much did we say, 2? Excellent. And now, okay, extrusion 5. Maybe that's too tall. I might actually go back to each one of these and change it to 3. I think that's gonna look better. There we go. Edit. There we go. Have a nicer base in there. Nice. So now we're gonna add the 2 columns on the side. So I'll go here to Sketch, this face. Okay. So now we're gonna draw. Actually, this is the line. This is the example that we did at the very introduction, where it is. Well, suppose I wanted a rectangle that is roughly there, and I want that is roughly there. So I'm gonna select these 2 lines, and I'll make them equal. There we go. And now suppose, yes, that I wanted that to be 15 as an example. And I want to make a rectangle that will go right there, which we could, by the way I could define this rectangle is by saying, well, I want that to be, I don't know, like 2 as well. Why not? In fact, I don't even need the dimension. I can just come here and say, make that 2. So I might actually, undo, maybe that 15, I'll make it say a 10, maybe 8.5. There we go. Excellent. Okay, so now that I know that, I can draw a rectangle in here. And what I know is if I make that, oh, undo, maybe that should be fine. Maybe it should be this distance, the one that I want to be 2. Okay. So let me see 1 second what happens if undo. Undo. Okay, this seems okay. Perfect. Sure, I think those dimensions should be fine. We will go here to okay, extrusion, and we're gonna make this sufficiently tall. So maybe we'll give it just 150, maybe 170. And say okay. So we have like a little gate that we're building in here. So we'll add one more base. So actually, one thing that we could do is I'll go here to sketch. I go to this face in here. I go to sketch, and now we are on that top face. And I can go over to our command project, which we used last time, and I can select each one of these lines. And I remember to click on the ball button of the mouse to ensure the command executes itself. So now I'm gonna close that, and now I have that rectangle in there, and okay, extrusion, we're gonna make that free. Excellent. So we look at the picture. Now we have like a slightly bigger rectangle that is about the size of the second one, but then we're gonna make it tall, and we're gonna make a cut that is gonna give that little rounded shape in there. So how do you do that? Well, we go here to sketch, face, okay, and now the exact same thing. Let's do projection. So let's select one, hit Control to ensure that you're selecting all that you want. Ball, excellent. And now, okay, extrude. So let's extrude by 20, maybe 25. Good. And now that we have this and we can go back here, what I'm gonna do is the following thing. I'll go here to sketch, to that face, sketch. And now, yes, we're gonna use the arch for the first time. And the one that I like is this one that is the 3-point arch, because I select that point. I select, oh, it's not letting me. And you know what I'm gonna do? Let me first draw a construction line that will go like that. Excellent. Let's see. There we go. And now it actually is working. But let me leave construction mode, and I'm gonna select those 2 points just like that. Excellent. So now we got our arch. And now, yes, we have the dimension there. I could also specify I want that height to be, so I can say 18. Great. So what do we do? Actually, I do need another full line. That way that's gonna be shaded, because I go to here to okay, extrude, remove material, change the direction, do, I don't know, through all as an example, say okay. And now we got that part. Now, before we design the gong, let's add a couple of details here. So one of the things that I wanted to add is a few chamfers. So that is maybe too much. Let's do like chamfers of 2. I'm gonna add them on all of the base pieces in here. That way it looks like majestic per se, right? So I'm gonna do that there and there. There we go. And now let's round. Actually, I'm just trying to see whether I like this or not, like the appearance. I think it looks decent. Maybe what I'm gonna change in my chamfer, let me edit these guys, is that I'm gonna get rid of that one. I get rid of that one too. 15. No, who's 16? Well, 13, 11, 10. There we go, 15. Now I like it a little bit better. What I could do, let me see, is chamfer. Oh, that is way better. Like that. Now that's, so it was just a matter of the order with which you apply the commands. Okay, so now we got actually the most of this frame done, to be honest. I don't think I'm gonna change much of it, to be fair. You know, maybe what I might change is I'm gonna do very small 1 mm chamfer. We are. So now we have, you know, just tiny details, but at least it makes a difference in order to make this look as realistic as it could be. Now let's do the gong in here. So we have all of the frame. Well, perhaps one thing I'll do is I'll go over to, I like that color. So what I'll do is here to view appearances. Let's select a good piece of wood for this thing. Maybe some, see some spruce, walnut, cherry, maple, let's see, ash, birch. There we go, mahogany. I think this looks like a nice color for our frame. Okay, so now, yes, let's do this piece. So the way that we can do this is either by, if we go back to our picture, drawing first the two strings and then the circle, or first the circle and then the two strings. The thing is, if I draw the circle first, it's as if it's gonna have like, it's gonna be like two bodies that are separate to each other. So what I might actually start by doing is by drawing the two strings first, and then I will draw the circle, and it's gonna connect everything together. So what we can have in here is the following thing. I'm gonna go all the way to model, then sketch, and I'm gonna choose this face right there, click on sketch overall. So we can draw a little circle that's gonna be on that line like that. That one is gonna be like that. We can define that to be 30, that one also to be 30. And technically, they are like a little bit tilted, but today we're not gonna learn how to do that yet, like how to make it go in that direction. But that would require using planes and some slightly more advanced techniques. Today you're just gonna go simply downwards, which is fine for all purposes. So we have that. So let's make that 2. Good. So let's go here to finish. And now we can go to our friend, the extrusion. And to be honest, we can make it go 50. It doesn't matter at this point, because I'm gonna click on OK. I will correct that in a minute. For now, I'm gonna now do a sketch on that plane in there. Let's go here to sketch. And looking at our command from last time, if I want the circle to be, say, halfway between these 2 points, what I can do is go to our frame construction mode and then project. And I'm gonna project, what line did I project? I'm gonna project that line, and I'm gonna project this line. Oy. So essentially what it created is two construction lines that represent edges. And this is useful because now I'm gonna exit that command, but I will draw another construction line that will go through the middle of those two. So what I have right there in that point is the middle. So we can do a big circle that's gonna go like that. And this is gonna represent our gong. Maybe the gong doesn't need to be this big. I can make it 30, like that. Okay. I think this is like an appropriate size. So what we can do from here is go to OK, extrusion, and we're gonna extrude in both directions by some amount. So what we can say is, let's go here to where it says symmetric. Let's do 10. So this is a thick gong, even though I will change some things in just a second, as you will see. But we're gonna leave this for the most part like this. And I'm gonna click on OK. Good. And now this is where I'm gonna go to our friend chamfer. Even though there's, yes, we'll do this chamfer in here, and I'll click, obviously, those edges. We need to make that like much bigger. We can say that it's like 20. Actually, that's not gonna work, will it? Hold on, let me cancel for a second. Cancel, yes. Let me go here, back again to chamfer. Let me see. Tangent distance, let's see what. Okay, that's too much. But let me see whether. No, that's fine. Let me see if I can do D1 and D2. So D2, let me change it to 5. There we go. So this is what I was looking for, which is in there. How do we make? You can make chamfers that are. I'm gonna leave that like 20, and then this we can make it like 50. And there, when now we're talking. Maybe that might need to be 4, to be honest. There we go. So it's just on the border in there, which is what I want. Good. Because I want that circle to be there, and we're gonna color that in a different color in a minute. We're gonna make that 3. Good. I think this is fine. Excellent. So now we have this gong, and this is fantastic. I love this. So let me try one command, which is called shell. There we go. The problem with the shell command just a second ago was the fact that I was putting a very large thickness of 3 millimeters. The reality in here, let me just delete that one, which didn't use in the end. Let me just show you what happened in here. So I selected a face, which is the one that we're gonna shell from. Precisely, it's gonna shell towards the inside. So you had to play around with this. Well, this is like a really, there you go. So now it's creating like a uniform thickness shell of 1.5 millimeters all around this. And this looks kind of legit, like a real gong almost in here. You have a big plate that is hanging from this piece right there. Excellent. Although now that I realize it, maybe we could move some of those 2 pieces like backwards, but I think this is fine. This is this is for like stability purposes. So one last thing, I'm gonna do a little trick, because otherwise I don't think it's gonna, if I go here to appearances, and I go here and Oh, it actually does let me select that face. Okay, so that is important because what I'm gonna do is go here to colors. Let me go to metals, to gold, and I'm gonna make all of this gold. Excellent. But that I'll change that in a minute. Then if I have my friend black, I'm gonna make those two guys black, like the two strings it's hanging from, and also that face. Excellent. So now we have our gong. Perhaps maybe to like make sure that this is kind of nice, I might go here to round some of these edges. There we go. Not that it matters much, but not that one, not the one in the back, but I wonder the one in the front, whether let's click on OK. At least you have the two strings in there. So let's go back to here to tools, appearances. Let's make that gold again. Excellent. So now we're done with our gong. So let's go back to our free planes. Let's hide them. So now we finished our second instrument of the day. So fairly simple technique overall, nothing too fancy to get all the way to this point. And honestly, the results are not bad at all. So I'm gonna save this. I'm gonna call it gong here in the desktop. Okay. So now let's do our last project of the day, which is gonna be given by the pan flute. The pan flute also shouldn't be like that difficult to do because it's essentially a bunch of pipes that are gonna be all aligned together. The fun part in here is gonna come from being able to, make sure that they're all in the right orientation. So how do we do that? Well, this is my approach. So what we can do here is a new part. Let's call this pan flute. Okay, and as always, go here, prepare model properties, change, set. Okay, sure, close, and make sure that you're using whatever units that you want. So let's make this piece. The fun part is that they're all gonna be different, like they're gonna all be at different locations. So that's something to have in mind. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 of these little ones. So how could you go about doing that? Okay, so I'm gonna go here to sketch, and I'm gonna first start by doing a sketch that we're not gonna work from it much. It's gonna be the master sketch. It's something that will act as a reference. So let me explain what I mean by that. So I'm gonna draw a circle. We're gonna go all the way like that. Sure, let's make that 400. And now these are all references. I'll draw a kind of like a quadrant in here. So suppose I want my pan flute to be, actually, I might change that angle to be 45 as an example. Suppose I want to lay it out all throughout here, which I think it's realistic, right? That's mostly like a quadrant in there. Maybe more. What if I said 60? And I can just lay down. You just have to make sure that the circles are all like similar sizes. So if you do 60 and I want to have 12 spaced out areas, this should work out because what I'm gonna do is now, well, I don't want a center line, I just want a regular line that will go like this, right? So now if I click on D and D, and I click in there, I can make that 5. So we're gonna make a few of those. We have 1, 2. So let's add a bunch of lines from here. Another approach is to create a bunch of lines, then connect them all through there and make all of those equal, right? And there you have like a nice looking regular polygon, which is a technique that we might use later in the future, but not today because it tends to be kind of messy. As we saw from what we did earlier with the xylophone, you just have to have a lot of patience whenever you are doing sketches because a good sketch is gonna really make it or break it. Wait, do a good sketch is gonna make your life easier later. So it's important to make sure that whatever you're doing now will help you later on. Actually, I'm realizing that these guys should be uh, that should be 11 if I make them 6. 5, yeah, I think they should be fine. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we need to do a few more of those. Okay. Okay, so now we have all of these lines drawn in here. So this is it for now, because now what I can do, well, actually, not quite, because I'm just gonna draw actually a bunch of circles that are not gonna be construction, just I can make them all like this. They're gonna be equal, and I'm gonna be using all of these later on. I'm gonna leave these guys like that. And they're all equal, so let's make them 31. Let's see. Good. I think this should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 13, which is the number that we were looking for. And the pan flute, they're also not touching, so that's great. It's important to make sure that that's the case. So we're gonna work through there. Good. Okay. So now we got all of those guys in here. Now I'm gonna start a new sketch. And this new sketch in here is gonna, let's go over to sketch in here. I click on OK. So the part that I want to draw now is, well, I'm gonna now draw the base in there, which is this little side piece overall. So how could we do that? Well, I'm gonna project these circles. And now that I've projected them, I kind of need to make them into, let me make them construction, but I do not need them yet. So I'm using my base sketch, the first one, as a reference for what I'm working on right now. And now I'm gonna go to my friend, the offset. I'm gonna click on, let me, complete loop, there we go. So I'm gonna, yes, offset that. I think that should be fine. Maybe 4 and 5 actually. Good. Oh, no, I should have clicked. Go here to complete loop in there by 5. And you know what? I don't need to be as fancy. I could just draw another circle. That is essentially the same. And I'm gonna make this 42 as an example. That's fine. So what we can do from here is 3 arches. One that will go from that point all the way to that point. It's gonna be like that, but I'm wondering if I can click on this line, I can click on that line and make those two tangent. Or actually, should maybe the order is tangent, then 1 and 2. There we go. So now we have like 2 lines that are there. The only problem is that I believe I should have chosen a different point on that end there. So let me go ahead and do that one more time. I'm just gonna go here to arch. So if I select those two and I make them, oh, actually, tangent to, there we go. And now let's do the same thing in here. Excellent. So now this works better. Excellent. Good. And I'm gonna do the exact same thing where I'm gonna draw another arch. I'm just gonna go to some point. So we'll go here to tangent 1 and 2. Good. And now we need to do the same thing. Tangent 1 and 2. Excellent. So it brings it gives you like a nice curvature. Okay, good. I'm gonna experiment by using a command. Let's see that where I find it in here. Where are you? Delete segment, which is like trim. And I'm gonna delete some segments that I do not need, which are, it's in this case, those two. And the reason why I'm doing that is because now this all becomes shaded. Otherwise, it was interfering. But we are almost done, because one last like item that I would like to do is that I'm gonna go all the way to my friend now, the offset. I'm gonna now, yes, select the complete loop, and I want to offset, and there we go, inwards by -5. So now they're all gonna be tangent like that. So I'm gonna click on OK. And now finish. So this banana shaped piece in here is gonna actually be one of the first things that I'm gonna CAD. So I'll go here to extrusion. And one little trick is that I do wanna give that tree color. So how do I give it that tree color? It's actually not that complicated. We're gonna suppose that this is like the first one, right? That we're gonna design. So we're gonna give this a 10 as an example. I'm gonna say, okay, good. And now the next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do another sketch here on this face. Okay. And now I'm gonna go here to my friend project. I'm gonna project all of these lines. Good. I wanted that. And now I'm gonna go to my friend, the offset. But I wanted to change, as always, to the complete loop. And what I'm gonna say, okay, is that I want this to be like 4.9, like barely noticeable, but it's enough that it's gonna make a difference. So I'll go here to okay, good. So I'm gonna now go here to extrude by 10. Excellent. Just like that. And now one last thing that we can do is go here back to sketch on this face. Good. And now with the project command, I can project, let's see, complete loop. Okay. Oh, sorry. Let's do a complete loop. Good. And now let's do another projection. Where are you? Excellent. Excellent. So now we got that face in there. Okay. Extrusion by 10. So why going all the way to do all of this stuff? Because now, whenever I start adding my circles, it's going to be so much easier to do this stuff. So good. Now, what can we do? Well, I'm going to go here to sketch. I'm going to do a sketch here in this face. I click on OK. And I'm going to start now projecting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, I didn't want that one. So on and so forth. I'm gonna bring all of these now to my sketch, and we're gonna start playing around with them. Because the first thing that I'll do, there we go. So they're all fully closed with the exception of that one, I think. Let me see. I'm gonna delete that. I'm gonna bring that again. That works. Excellent. So we're gonna go over to, okay. And now extrusion, but this is what I would call the top side, right? So maybe in this direction, I'm gonna give it 30. Let's see. No, that's too little. About 50. Let me take a look at the picture. Maybe I think this should be fine. Let's give it like a nice 80 in there. And now the fun begins in extruding each one of them downwards to make that little, you know, shape in there. So, and by the way, we could add even those little strings if you wanted to. That would be a little, yeah, I think we can do it. But maybe it might look, I think I know how we can do this. So I'm gonna go back to maybe sketch. Let me see. There we go. So I just wanted to make one last thing. So now we're able to extrude downwards, and we're gonna add like that little chord in here, which I think should make for a nice little touch in each one of these little guys. So the way, actually, this is a good point to also color this thing. So what we can do in the meantime is, I'm gonna go here to view appearances, and now we're gonna go back to, let's see, wood. So this one, bamboo would be a nice one to see whether maybe let's do like oak. And I'm gonna choose here the intent surfaces. I'll select all of those guys in there. I click on OK. Okay, that looks, it's a nice appearance in there. And now for those guys, so it was green, orange, red. Okay. So how are we gonna do that? By again going to, well, you can go over to model appearances, right? Well, not that one, but let me see. Appearance manager. So for this one, let's say, well, that one doesn't allow me to change it, but I can go here to this black one and say I wanted like a custom green as an example, so I can find it from the palette in here. There we go. So I'm gonna go for that green and go here to close. So now if we go to appearances, intent surface, there we go. The inside won't be colored, but it's all the same face, but it's okay. I'll make that green, then orange. So let's make the next one orange. So let me see if I can find, make it here. My appearances, more appearances. Let me go to orange. There we go. I think that's a Oh no, close. I kind of did not want to do that. There we go. And now, yes, now we have our new color in there, intent surface. Got that little line in there, because why not? We're gonna be orange, and now let's make the bottom one red. So we got, I believe that red in here, intent surface. There we go. Now we have like a nice, it looks like Burger King, to be honest. To have the colors all the way like that. It's a one of those little strips in there. So now let's add the little chord in there. Now that we have this defined, so let's go here to model, sketch, face, click on sketch and whatnot. And now we need to trace a lot of those circles, and we need to just expand them slightly. So how do we do that? Well, I'm gonna go here to construction mode. Then here go to my friend there, where are you, project? And I just realized that I could go for this one that's called all curves on feature. Well, actually, I haven't selected anything yet. Go for let me go here to project 1 second. There we go. Let me click on OK. Well, actually only created that one, but I'm gonna try to create all the other ones too. Go here. So now I can just manually select like that. The red is I could have also projected our original sketch, but this is fine. It's not the end of the world to do it this way. Go here to OK. So now with all of this stuff, I'm gonna do a set of circles that are gonna be slightly bigger than all the prior ones, because they will act as a little chord. Let's do that. Well done, one by one. Cool. Excellent. So now the dimension of that, we can say it's 33.5. Why not? And now we'll go here to OK, extrude, and we're gonna extrude by like 2 millimeters or something like minimal. In there, we'll say OK, excellent. And now we're gonna continue. So what we can do is go here to sketch, over to this face, and now from now onwards, this is where we start to give this the shape that it has. So we're gonna start with that one slowly, and we're gonna go increasing. So I'll go over to that face. So this is gonna be a little bit of a slow process, so I'm gonna speed it up again. Alrighty, so now at least we have the overall shape of our pan flute, and it's honestly looking quite good, to be fair. But now we have to add the last series of details, and these involve the following. First, we have to go here to sketch. And one important thing that we need to do is make this hollow. Otherwise, it's not quite a flute per se. And the way to do that, also one thing I will say is that I'm gonna assume that they're all gonna be stuck like to this little band in there, but the way to make them all hollow is like this. So now again, we're gonna project all of these guys. So let me just actually do one by one. At least they're gonna be construction circles. And once I have them all laid out like that, what I can do is identify their origins, which is now being displayed, and draw another set of concentric circles that are going to be slightly smaller. So how do we do that? Well, I'll go here to circle, and I'll draw them like that. There we go. Unfortunately, it recognizes that I want them all to be equal, so it's doing that. Boom, just like that. Excellent. There we go. And now we can say that we want our size to be 23. So what can we do with this? Well, we're gonna go to extrude, remove material, and we'll say through all. Excellently. Okay. So we're almost essentially done because the parts that remain from here are simple. We go back to our picture, we see that yes, that is chamfer, and we're gonna chamfer it in there. So let's go ahead and add a few chamfers. Maybe that's too much. Well, let's add them all, boom, just like that. We'll add them on the top and in the bottom. Oy. There we go. Good. And now let's do it back here. Delete. There we go. And then right after we're done with this, what I'll do is I'll change the colors. And I think that should be the very last step for us. I'm gonna click on OK. We got most of our details in here. You know, why not? Let's add a little fillet in here. And another one right here too. I'll deal with that in a minute with those rubber bands. So now let's do some coloring. So let's go here to appearances. So I'll have to, let me go here to indent surfaces. Very good. And now let's change it to our green. Indent surfaces that. Excellent. Now let's change it back to our wood. Let's do indent surfaces like that. Actually, I should have done these. All of these, but they were all individual parts, right? So that's why it's really allowing us to do that. And that, terrific. And maybe for this, like these rings in here, let me see whether I could, let me see the colors. You know, I'll make those orange. Why not? Let me go here to orange. Surfaces like that. Boom, boom. Terrific. We are almost done because we need to also change the color here. There we go. Okay, this seems mostly done, to be honest, with the exception of maybe removing those planes. But and our original sketch one, I'm gonna hide it too, that way we cannot see it. But this is the pan flute. I think it looks roughly like the actual design if we compare this one and like that one. I think this one had like the little balls in here, and it looks more rustic, right? These tubes are too perfect, to be honest. But I think it's a decent approximation for a CAD model. Well, folks, we have survived session one today. Thank you very much for sticking along. I hope some of these things were useful. I'm just going to pick up from here, but at least you can see that with the commands that we've learned today, we can already quite do a lot of things, from the xylophone to the pan flute to the gong. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.